I was about 12 when a loud bang woke me up from my sleep. Hear the sounds of my parents fighting, the yelling, the screaming, flesh hitting flesh. I could tell right away that this was a bad one. I stayed as quiet as I could, not moved for fear that any squeak of the bed would alert my parents. I listened to not so much to the fight itself, but to the flow of it. Would this fight escalate? Would it involve me? After a while, I finally drifted off back to sleep. I woke up the next morning to the sound of the front door slamming, footsteps leaving the house, and I could tell they were my father's. I had learned to tell the sounds that my parents had made. Their movements and their sounds were a window into how their moods were, and knowing those sounds and those movements were key to my survival. I slowly got out of bed, very careful to avoid any of the loose floorboards, stepping toe to heel across my room. I was listening to see if my mother was still there. See, I couldn't go downstairs yet. By the slam of the door, I could tell that last night's fight wasn't truly over. It was best if I stayed upstairs, out of sight and hopefully out of mind. After a few moments, I heard my mother moving around the family room, the kitchen, and the living room. I could tell that she finally settled at the desk, and she was there for a while. Eventually, she left. Finally confident that they were gone, I slowly left my room to go downstairs. I was still careful to avoid making any sounds, not because I was afraid they were coming back. It was just simply habit at this point in my life. I went into the family room and I turned to go into the kitchen, and that's when I saw it. There was this hole in the door jamb between the family room and the kitchen. And that's when I realized that the sound that had woken me up last night was a gunshot. All other thought left my mind. I just simply had to know what had happened. By looking at the hole, knew the shot must have come from the family room into the kitchen. So I began to go into the kitchen and look around, and finally I found where the bullet had come to rest. So I knew that someone had fired a shot last night and where it had wound up, but I still didn't know who had shot it and why. So I walked into the living room and remembered my mom had been sitting at the desk earlier in the morning, so I went over there, and that's when I found a few pieces of paper that had writing and pencil on them. They were from my father. He had wrote down what had happened the night before. I began to read very quickly, skimming. They had fought. There was an argument. My mother was drunk. There were accusations. She left, came back with the gun. There was a struggle, and then the gun went off. As I was reading, I noticed that there were red ink marks on the paper. They were in my mother's handwriting. And at that moment, I realized that my mother had woken up, found this statement that my father had written, and then corrected all of his punctuation and grammatical errors. I began to laugh, this deep guttural laugh, the kind of laugh that makes your face and your sides hurt. And then I began to cry just as quickly. And I wondered, is this what insanity feels like?